My name is Emily Carter, and for 33 years, I believed that the safest way to live was to remain invisible, to let others underestimate my abilities while I quietly built something extraordinary. I was wrong about many things, but I was especially wrong about the price of that invisibility. Here I sit in this solemn courtroom, where the air carries that familiar mixture of aged wood and nervous perspiration, suffocating, yet oddly comforting. It reminds me of the scent I encounter daily at the Massachusetts Historical Archives, where I work among documents that whisper of centuries past. The weight of history settles around us like a heavy cloak. My hands rest steadily on the cold mahogany table before me, fingers betraying not the slightest tremor. 3 decades of life have taught me that sometimes the most powerful response comes from the calmest waiting. In this charged atmosphere, my parents have just finished presenting their case to the court. They claim I suffer from severe judgment impairment and an inability to manage my finances responsibly, therefore requiring a legal guardian. Their attorney has meticulously outlined my supposed problems in the court documents. My apartment overflows with what they consider worthless old objects, displaying classic hoarding behaviors. My long periods of solitude and limited social life indicate clear signs of antisocial and avoidant personality disorders. My bank statements reveal supposedly abnormal spending patterns, with frequent large purchases at antique shops and auction houses for what they dismiss as worthless junk. Sitting expressionless in the defendant's chair, I remain calm as still water. Their lawyer wears a slight smile, as if victory is already assured. What they want is access to my bank accounts, my car, even the apartment I purchased with my own careful savings. The court clerk opens his folder and begins reading the property inventory aloud. Just as he reaches the third item, Judge Lawrence Brooks's expression changes dramatically, his eyes widening in apparent shock. "Stop immediately! Get security in here!" he shouts, and I watch my parents' faces drain of all color in an instant. Time seems to freeze in this dignified courtroom. I turn to look at Sarah Collins, my attorney, sitting beside me. This Harvard Law School graduate, who has won countless victories in Boston family courts, adjusts her signature tortoiseshell glasses and allows the faintest smile to cross her lips. It is the expression of a hunter watching prey walk willingly into a trap, the signal that our carefully orchestrated plan of 3 months has finally taken effect. My parents, John Carter and Margaret Carter, sit rigidly in the plaintiff's section. Just moments ago, they were playing the role of heartbroken, loving parents forced to take legal action for their daughter's own good. John wears his Panama hat brought back from Florida, attempting to hide the sunspots accumulated over years of retirement. Margaret is dressed in her finest blue suit, purchased a decade ago from Nordstrom, now showing signs of fading. They dressed carefully for today, hoping to present themselves as responsible adults in contrast to their daughter, whom they have painted as eccentric, reclusive, and financially irresponsible. Now, as the judge's angry voice echoes through the chamber, their carefully maintained facade is rapidly crumbling, revealing the greedy, frightened, and desperate faces beneath. This entire saga began on an autumn afternoon that would forever change the trajectory of my life. 3 months ago, my life resembled the precious archives I manage, quiet, orderly, filled with the poetic weight of accumulated years. I am Emily Carter, 33 years old, senior archivist at the Massachusetts Historical Archives. Every morning at 8:15, I arrive punctually at our facility in Cambridge, don my white lab coat and cotton gloves, and begin my daily conversations with yellowed documents and ancient photographs. My world consists of climate-controlled storage rooms, the texture of paper transmitted through white gloves, and ink traces that carry the weight of centuries. My colleagues know me as a dedicated scholar. During lunch breaks, while others gather in the break room discussing the latest episodes of The Bachelorette or The Voice, I prefer to sit alone in the archives, eating my homemade turkey sandwich while studying 1880s Boston immigration ship records. After work, I drive my reliable but unremarkable 2015 Honda Civic back to my apartment in Brookline. It sits in a 1920s four-story brick building at the intersection of Washington and Beacon Streets, surrounded by the typical New England middle-class neighborhood. My third-floor apartment is modest in size, 2 bedrooms and 1 living area, but perfectly adequate for my needs. To the outside world, I live an almost monastic existence. No boyfriend, rarely attending social functions, spending weekends browsing antique shops, flea markets, and auction houses. When neighbors occasionally encounter me in the hallway, they nod politely, but I can read the sympathy in their eyes that says, "Poor old maid, living alone with nothing but a bunch of useless old things for company." What they do not know is that those supposedly useless old things are the secret source of my wealth and my unique way of connecting with the world. From childhood, I possessed an unusual sensitivity to old objects. Perhaps I inherited this gift from my great-grandfather's genes. He was once a famous Boston antique dealer, though he died before my birth. My grandmother always said I had his ability to see through time itself. This talent first manifested when I was 8 years old. That Thanksgiving, our family visited a Connecticut farm to purchase pumpkins. In the farmer's barn, I discovered what appeared to be an ordinary wooden chair. The paint had chipped and the cushion was worn, but when my small hands traced the hand-carved patterns on the chair back, I could feel the weight of centuries. I begged my parents to buy that chair. They thought it was childish whimsy, but spent $15 to indulge my request. Later, during my high school American history class, studying colonial period furniture making, I realized that chair's true value. I quietly consulted a professional antique appraiser, and the results were shocking. It was a mid-18th century Windsor chair, crafted by renowned Philadelphia artisan Thomas Gillespie, with a market value exceeding $30,000. From that moment, I began consciously cultivating this gift. I devoured books about antique appreciation, art history, and craft production, learning to judge items' age and value from subtle craft characteristics, material choices, and period markings. More importantly, I learned how to maintain a low profile in crowds, how to bid discreetly at auctions, and how to build trust relationships with various dealers and collectors. During college, I majored in history and library science, which provided perfect cover for my collecting activities. Professors and classmates viewed my interest in antiquities as purely academic, and I did indeed derive tremendous intellectual satisfaction from the work. But simultaneously, I was quietly building a remarkable collection system. My collection spans items from the colonial period through the late 19th century: handwritten letters, rare books and manuscripts, silverware, porcelain, furniture, jewelry, timepieces, and even some military artifacts. Each piece carries its own story, and every story connects to some fragment of American history. My apartment resembles a small private museum, though to the uninformed eye, these items appear to be merely the hoarding of an eccentric woman. This misunderstanding perfectly protected my secret. I intentionally maintained an appearance of ordinary financial means, driving a mid-range car, wearing discounted clothing from Target and Marshall's, choosing chain restaurants like Olive Garden when dining out. My bank accounts appeared consistent with a typical archivist's income because my true wealth did not exist in cash form, but lay hidden in those seemingly worn-out collectibles filling my apartment. I estimate that if my entire collection went to auction, the total value would range between $2 and $3 million. This figure would allow me to purchase a Boston townhouse or retire early for world travel. But I chose neither path because for me, these collectibles held meaning far beyond their monetary value. They are witnesses to history, crystallizations of ancestral wisdom, bridges connecting me to past and present. I thought I could live this way forever, working days at the archives, evenings and weekends immersed in my collecting world, occasionally selling pieces to cover living expenses, always maintaining discretion and avoiding external interference that might threaten this delicate balance. I was wrong. That Tuesday afternoon that changed everything, autumn sunlight streamed through the archive's tall windows onto my work table. I was organizing a batch of 1890s immigration records, work requiring extreme patience and attention to detail. Each document needed careful examination to confirm completeness, then digitization according to strict standards. At 3 o'clock, Director Mary Thompson knocked on my office door. She held a pale blue envelope with a puzzled expression. "Emily, this just arrived by express delivery, addressed to you," she said. "It looks like legal documents." I accepted the envelope with growing unease. The official seal of Suffolk County Family Court was embossed on the cover, my name printed in formal black letters on a white label. Ms. Emily Rose Carter. My hands trembled slightly as I tore open the envelope, not from fear, but from anticipated anger. I unfolded the documents inside, the title immediately catching my eye: Petition for Conservatorship. Petitioners John William Carter and Margaret Ann Carter. Respondent Emily Rose Carter. The opening paragraph hit me like a punch to the chest. Petitioners respectfully request this court appoint petitioners as conservators for respondent Emily Rose Carter. Although respondent is an adult, she exhibits serious judgment deficits, hoarding tendencies, and an inability to manage her finances reasonably. Petitioners, as respondents' biological parents, have the responsibility and obligation to protect respondent from harm caused by her own inappropriate behavior. I continued reading, my anger deepening with each line. My parents had described me as a mentally impaired adult, claiming my apartment was filled with garbage and worthless old objects. My lifestyle reclusive and unhealthy, my financial situation chaotic and unmanageable. They also attached a series of supposed evidence, photographs of my apartment, obviously taken secretly during their Thanksgiving visit last year. My bank account statements, how did they obtain these? And even a so-called psychological evaluation claiming I suffered from hoarding syndrome and social disorders. Most shocking was that they sought not merely financial guardianship, but complete conservatorship, including control over my housing, medical decisions, and even my employment. If the court approved this petition, I would lose all legal rights as an adult, essentially becoming treated like someone with intellectual disabilities. After finishing the documents, I placed them quietly on my desk. Mary still stood in the doorway, watching me with concern. "Emily, are you all right? What happened?" "Nothing serious, Mary. Just some family legal documents." I tried to keep my voice calm. "I need to leave work early to handle this matter." "Of course, no problem. If you need time off?" "Thank you. I will let you know." I gathered my things and drove home to my apartment. Throughout the journey, my mind raced, trying to understand this sudden attack. Why would my parents do this? How did they know about my savings? What was their real objective? Upon reaching my apartment, my first action was to pick up the phone and dial a number stored in my contacts for years, but rarely used. "Sarah, this is Emily. We need to talk." The next morning, I sat in Sarah Collins's office in Boston's financial district. Her office occupied the 25th floor of a 30-story glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. Sarah's desk was massive mahogany, neatly arranged with legal documents and reference books. Her Harvard law degree hung on the wall alongside certificates from various prestigious cases. Sarah herself looked like she had stepped out of a Law and Order episode. Tall, with carefully styled auburn hair and a perfectly tailored black suit. Her gaze was sharp and focused, her voice clear and authoritative. We had been roommates at Harvard, where she already displayed the qualities of an excellent lawyer. Clear logic, exceptional memory, and most importantly, she never backed down. "Emily," Sarah said while reviewing the court documents I had brought, "this petition is professionally written. Your parents have hired no ordinary attorney." "Do you know this lawyer?" I pointed to the signature on the petition. "James Mason, Mason Law Firm." "Certainly, Jim Mason specializes in these types of cases. He excels at helping family members obtain guardianship over supposedly incapacitated relatives. He has a successful strategy, magnifying any abnormal aspects of the respondent's lifestyle details to construct an image of someone needing protection." Sarah set down the documents and looked at me seriously. "The problem is, Emily, superficially, you do fit certain characteristics of a reclusive adult, living alone, unmarried, having collecting hobbies, a small social circle. To a judge unfamiliar with the truth, these traits could easily be interpreted as signals that you need help. But I have a job, stable income, my life is well organized." "I understand, but look at these photographs." Sarah spread a stack of color photos across the table. "This is your apartment, correct?" Looking at those photos filled me with rage. They were obviously carefully selected and cropped to highlight the most chaotic-looking corners of my apartment. The dining table piled with books and documents, the living room displaying various antiques, the bedroom filled with collectibles. To uninformed viewers, this truly resembled a hoarder's home. "They did not photograph any background information," I said angrily. "No shots of my employment certificates, my diplomas, none of the authentication certificates for those collectibles." "Exactly the point," Sarah nodded. "They only presented evidence favorable to their case. And Emily, I need to ask you a direct question. What is your actual financial situation? How much wealth do you truly possess?" I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I was about to reveal my true financial status to anyone. "Approximately $2.5 to $3 million, I said, "primarily in the form of collectibles." Sarah's eyes widened instantly as she set down her pen. "What? Emily, are you saying you have nearly $3 million in assets?" "Yes, but it is not mainly cash, it is antiques and art pieces I have collected over many years." "This," Sarah stood and paced around her office. "This completely changes the entire situation. Do your parents know?" "I do not think they know specific amounts. They know I have some collections, but I always let them believe those were just personal hobbies without significant value." "Then why are they seeking guardianship? What is their motivation?" I shared what I knew about my parents' financial situation. Father John had opened a yacht sales company in Florida several years ago, but it failed due to poor management and the 2008 economic crisis. Mother Margaret had gambling problems, frequently visiting Las Vegas and Connecticut Indian casinos. Their house was second mortgaged, and they carried heavy credit card debt. "So they see you as their lifeline," Sarah concluded. "They may not know your assets' exact value, but they know you have savings, and your lifestyle makes them think you are easy to control." "What should I do?" Sarah sat back down, tapping her fingers on the table. Her thinking habit. "First, we need to prepare comprehensive counter-evidence. This includes your financial records, employment verification, mental health evaluation, and professional appraisals of your collectibles. We need to prove that not only do you not need guardianship, but your financial management abilities far exceed the average person." "And then?" Then we need to uncover your parents' true motives. If we can prove their guardianship petition aims to access your property to pay their own debts, this case becomes an indictment against them. Sarah's expression sharpened in a way I remembered from our college debate preparation days. Emily, in cases like this, the best defense is offense. We need to prove not only that you have no problems, but expose their problems. This requires time and strategy. Are you ready? I thought about those quiet years spent in the archives, my carefully protected collection, the free life about to be forcibly stripped away. I am ready. Over the following weeks, I lived a double life. Days, I continued working at the archives, maintaining normal schedules as if nothing had happened. But every evening after work and on weekends, under Sarah's guidance, I investigated my own parents' lives like a detective. This proved a painful process. When you begin examining your family using courtroom evidence standards, you discover many truths you would prefer not to know. I first contacted a private investigator named Mark Rodriguez. Mark was Sarah's recommendation, specializing in financial investigations for family dispute cases. He was a former police officer in his 50s, with deep brown eyes and graying beard, speaking directly and professionally. "Miss Carter," Mark said during our first meeting, "I need you to provide your parents' basic information, social security numbers, current addresses, banking information, any financial details you know. We need to build a complete financial profile." I provided all the information I possessed. My parents lived in a seaside apartment in Sarasota, Florida, purchased with money inherited from grandmother's estate. Father's yacht company was called Gulf Star Yacht Sales. Mother had no formal employment but possessed an American Express gold card, frequently used for casino expenses. 2 weeks later, Mark returned with a detailed report whose contents shocked me. "Your parents," Mark said while reviewing the files, "are on the verge of financial collapse. Your father's company owes suppliers over $800,000, and the Internal Revenue Service is investigating their tax returns. Your mother's gambling losses over the past 2 years exceed $150,000, and her credit card debt has reached her credit limits." "What about their house?" "Second mortgaged, and they have already received foreclosure notices from the bank. If they cannot pay overdue loans within 90 days, the bank will repossess the property." I felt dizzy. Though my relationship with my parents was never close, I never imagined their situation could be so dire. "There is worse news," Mark continued. "According to information from my contacts in Las Vegas and Connecticut, your mother also owes loan sharks at several casinos. These are not bank loans, Miss Carter. This is dangerous debt." I began understanding why they would petition for guardianship over me. In their eyes, I was their only lifeline. But they did not realize that through this approach, they not only threatened my freedom, but pushed themselves toward legal disaster. While Mark conducted his financial investigation, I was also digging into a deeper secret. While sorting through grandmother's belongings, I remembered something that had puzzled me 10 years earlier. When my grandmother, Elena Carter, died in 2013, she left behind a family heirloom sapphire brooch. This brooch, called Midnight Star, was brought to America from Europe in the late 19th century by grandmother's grandmother. Its center featured a rare 12-carat deep blue Burmese sapphire surrounded by small diamonds with an elegant and classic overall design. According to grandmother's will, this brooch should have passed to me as the only granddaughter in the family. But shortly after grandmother's funeral, my parents told me the brooch had been stolen during the funeral. They filed a police report and contacted the insurance company, ultimately receiving $500,000 in insurance compensation. At that time, I was still in graduate school, busy with studies and lacking deep knowledge about family jewelry, so I accepted my parents' explanation. But now, Facing their legal attack, I began re-examining this matter. I contacted the Boston police detective who had handled that case and learned the case did exist but was never solved. Then I contacted Allianz Insurance Company, which had processed the claim, and obtained copies of the claim documents. More importantly, I asked Mark to investigate my parents' overseas financial activities. He discovered a shocking detail. My parents had opened a safety deposit box account at a Swiss bank. This account was established exactly 6 months after grandmother's death. This might be just coincidence, Mark cautioned me, but considering the timing and your parents' current financial situation, I recommend we investigate this Swiss account thoroughly. Through Mark's international investigation network, we discovered more clues. That Swiss bank account showed recent activity. Someone had removed items stored inside. Moreover, according to our leads, someone had recently tried to sell a sapphire brooch on the European black market, but failed due to lack of legitimate certificates. Then I remembered a crucial detail. While organizing grandmother's documents, I had found the insurance appraisal certificate for the Midnight Star brooch, which detailed all the brooch's characteristics, including the sapphire's weight, purity, and unique inclusion features. I had stored this certificate in my safety deposit box because it was part of family history. If my parents truly still possessed that brooch, if they were attempting to sell it, then they had committed not only insurance fraud, but perjured themselves in court. More importantly, if I could prove this, I could expose their real motivation for seeking guardianship. "This is an excellent opportunity," Sarah said after hearing my discoveries. "But we need them to expose themselves. We need to set a trap." We spent several days devising our plan. During the upcoming pre-trial evidence exchange phase, I needed to appear nervous and flustered, making my parents' lawyer believe I was indeed psychologically unstable. Simultaneously, I would accidentally reveal information, making them believe I knew the brooch's whereabouts, even suggesting I might possess it. The plan's core was exploiting my parents' greed. If they believed I owned that $500,000 brooch, they would eagerly want to include it in the guardianship petition's asset list. But once they did so, they would essentially admit to the insurance fraud from 10 years earlier. We set our trap cleverly. During a pre-trial conference, I deliberately appeared nervous and agitated, constantly fidgeting with my pen and speaking with a trembling voice. When Lawyer Mason questioned my collectibles' value, I blurted out in apparent panic, "You do not understand. Those things are more valuable than you imagine, especially that." Then I suddenly stopped, as if realizing I had said too much, looking nervously toward Sarah. Mason immediately seized on this detail. "What? Especially what, Miss Carter?" "Nothing, nothing." I acted even more nervous. "I should not have said that. That is what grandmother left me." Sarah interrupted timely. "Emily, you do not need to answer their questions." But the damage was done. I saw Mason's eyes light up, and I noticed my parents exchange a meaningful glance when they heard, "Grandmother left me." Several days later, we received a revised property inventory. Just as we expected, it contained a new addition. Carter Family Sapphire Brooch Midnight Star, which petitioners understand may be held by respondent, estimated value $550,000. Seeing this line, both Sarah and I smiled. They had taken the bait. The court hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday in November. Boston's sky was overcast gray, the air heavy with the promise of coming snow. Suffolk County Family Court occupied a stately stone building dating to the early 19th century. Walking through the courthouse doors, I thought about those historical documents I had organized in the archives, about the countless battles between justice and injustice that had taken place within this building. The courtroom interior was traditionally solemn, dark wood paneling, tall windows, American and Massachusetts flags hanging side by side behind the judge's bench. The gallery held several reporters and law students who always showed interest in these types of internal family property disputes. The presiding judge was Lawrence Brooks, a veteran jurist in his 60s, known for fairness and severity. He had silver gray hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to see through to one's soul when he examined everyone in his courtroom. Judge Brooks had over 20 years of experience handling family guardianship cases and despised those who tried to exploit the legal system for personal gain. I sat in the defendant's chair beside Sarah. Today, she wore a deep navy blue suit with hair perfectly arranged, radiating the authority of a professional attorney. In the plaintiff's section, my parents sat beside their lawyer, James Mason. Mason was a man in his 40s, slightly overweight, wearing frameless glasses with hair combed in a neat side part. His strategy was obvious: emphasize my reclusive lifestyle and chaotic living environment to convince the judge I needed protection. Your Honor, Mason said in his opening statement, we face today a sad but necessary case. Mr. and Mrs. Carter deeply love their daughter, but they must confront a painful reality. Emily can no longer independently manage her own life. Her apartment overflows with worthless old objects. She has no friends, no social life, and she has isolated herself in a world composed of the past. Mason displayed those apartment photographs, pointing out my hoarding tendencies and social isolation. He also quoted a mental health expert's report, claiming these behavioral patterns indicated I suffered from hoarding syndrome and avoidant personality disorder. My clients are not trying to harm their daughter, Mason continued. On the contrary, they are working to protect her. As loving parents, they have the responsibility to ensure Emily receives the help she needs, professional financial management, and a healthy, normal life. Then it was Sarah's turn to speak. She stood up with a clear, powerful voice. Your Honor, what we will expose today is not a daughter who needs protection, but greedy parents attempting to exploit the legal system to plunder their daughter's property. This statement caused a slight stir in the courtroom. Mason immediately objected. Objection! Counsel is making personal attacks. Objection overruled, Judge Brooks said. Counselor Collins, please continue your statement, but mind your language. Sarah nodded. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Emily Carter not only does not need guardianship, but her financial management abilities far exceed the average person. She is a highly educated professional with stable employment and considerable personal wealth. Her lifestyle may not conform to certain people's expectations, but this is not grounds for court intervention. What truly needs attention is the petitioner's motivation. They face serious financial difficulties and desperately need funds to pay their debts, and they see their daughter's property as their lifeline. Over the next several hours, both sides began calling witnesses. Mason first called that mental health expert, a psychologist named Richard Wilson. Wilson had never personally met me. His evaluation was based entirely on information my parents provided and those apartment photographs. Based on my professional judgment, Wilson testified from the witness stand, the respondent exhibits typical hoarding syndrome symptoms: excessive collecting and retaining objects, inability to discard worthless items, living spaces occupied by clutter. This behavioral pattern usually accompanies social withdrawal and judgment deficits. When Sarah's turn came for cross-examination, she quickly exposed the flaws in Wilson's assessment. Dr. Wilson, did you personally examine my client? No, but... Did you visit her residence? No, but the photographs show. Are you aware that many of the items my client collects are antiques and collectibles with significant historical and economic value? I was not informed of this. So your evaluation was based on incomplete, possibly misleading information? I based my professional judgment on information provided by the petitioners. But if that information was deliberately and selectively provided to support a specific conclusion, then your professional judgment was the result of manipulation, was it not? Mason objected, but the damage was done. Wilson's testimony was severely undermined. Then my parents took the witness stand. Mother Margaret testified first. She wore her finest, deep blue suit, trying to project the image of a loving mother. "I just want my daughter to get help," she said from the witness stand, her voice carrying carefully designed trembling. "Seeing her live like this breaks my heart. She has locked herself in that apartment full of garbage, refusing to connect with the outside world. As a mother, I have the responsibility to protect her." But when Sarah began cross-examination, Margaret's performance started showing cracks. "Mrs. Carter, how often do you visit your daughter?" We talk on the phone frequently." I asked about visits, not phone calls. "How often do you personally visit her?" "About every few months." "Actually, according to records, you visited her apartment only 3 times in the past 2 years, 2 of which were to take those photographs, correct?" "No, that was not." "Did you tell your daughter that you knew the true value of those collectibles?" "What collectibles? Those are all junk." "Then why did you request guardianship over a sapphire brooch worth $550,000 in your property inventory?" This question caught Margaret off guard. She froze for several seconds on the witness stand, then nervously looked toward Attorney Mason. "I, that is a family heirloom." "Indeed, it is a family heirloom. But according to insurance records, this brooch was reported stolen in 2013, and your family received $500,000 in insurance compensation for it, correct?" The courtroom fell silent. Everyone realized the importance of this question. If this brooch was stolen, how do you know it is now with your daughter? If she truly possesses it, then either it was never stolen or she is holding stolen property. Either way, this indicates problems with your previous testimony, does it not? Mason jumped up. "Objection! Counsel is speculating." "Objection sustained," Judge Brooks said, but his gaze became more penetrating. "However, this question does need clarification." Then came the crucial moment. "Now please have the court clerk read the revised property inventory," Judge Brooks ordered. The clerk, a middle-aged man wearing thick glasses, opened the folder before him. The courtroom air seemed to solidify as everyone awaited the coming critical moment. First asset item, apartment property at 412 Washington Street, Brookline, estimated value approximately $350,000. My parents' lawyer nodded smugly, as if already seeing victory within reach. Second asset item, Wells Fargo savings account, balance approximately $85,000. Mother Margaret gripped Father John's hand tightly. I could see greed flickering in her eyes. For them, drowning in debt, these figures represented salvation. Third asset item. The clerk paused, seeming confused by the document's contents, but he read aloud anyway. Midnight Star sapphire brooch. Petitioner's claim held by respondent Emily Carter, valued by petitioners at $550,000. The instant those words finished, Judge Brooks's expression changed dramatically. His eyes widened and his body leaned forward. "Stop immediately! Get security in here!" he shouted while forcefully banging his gavel. The courtroom doors burst open as 2 uniformed bailiffs quickly entered. Whispers rose from the gallery as reporters began frantically taking notes. Father John stood up in panic, his voice trembling. "Your Honor, what is happening? We are just trying to help our daughter, who obviously cannot manage herself." "Silence, Mr. Carter," Judge Brooks's roar thundered through the courtroom. He banged his gavel again forcefully, the sound echoing off the walls. If you and your wife claim this brooch is your daughter's asset and petition this court to authorize you to take control of it, then you are admitting in court, under oath, that the 2013 theft report you filed with Allianz Insurance Company was false. I watched Mother Margaret's face instantly drain of all color, as if every drop of blood had been sucked out in a single moment. She opened her mouth, trying to speak, but no sound emerged. She looked terrifyingly toward Attorney Mason sitting beside her, but Mason was also panicking, frantically flipping through documents before him with sweat beading his forehead. No, it is not like that. Father John tried to defend himself, his voice growing weaker. We just believed. Maybe she knew where it was. Judge Brooks stood up, his figure particularly imposing under the courtroom lights. According to the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Stolen Art Database, the Midnight Star sapphire brooch has been listed as stolen property since 2013. Anyone claiming to own or possess this item faces criminal charges for receiving stolen property. Then Sarah gracefully stood, her voice clear and calm. Your Honor, I would like to clarify several important facts. First, my client, Emily Carter, has never claimed to own or possess this brooch. Second, it was the petitioners, her parents, who voluntarily included this brooch in the property inventory, claiming it was my client's asset. This action not only exposes their perjury in the 2013 insurance fraud case, but more importantly, it reveals their true motivation for seeking guardianship, not out of love for their daughter, but out of greed for her property. The courtroom erupted in greater commotion. The sound of reporters flipping notebook pages, audience gasps, and my parents' panicked arguments mixed together. Furthermore, Your Honor, Sarah continued, raising her voice above the noise, we have reason to believe the petitioners may still possess this brooch and recently attempted to sell it on the European black market. This constitutes not only insurance fraud, but potentially international art trafficking. Judge Brooks forcefully banged his gavel again. Quiet! The entire courtroom instantly fell silent. The bailiffs approached my parents' seats. This moment carried profound irony. They had come to place legal shackles on me, but now would wear real handcuffs themselves. John Carter and Margaret Carter, one bailiff announced, you are under arrest for suspected insurance fraud, perjury, and possible art trafficking. You have the right to remain silent. Emily! Mother screamed hysterically as she was led away. You ungrateful little bitch! You did this on purpose. You deliberately set a trap. We raised you, gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? Her voice was filled with anger and venom, no longer containing any pretense of maternal love. In this moment, everyone in the courtroom saw her true nature, a greedy mother willing to sell her daughter's freedom for money. When Father John was pulled to his feet, he was still attempting final arguments. This is not fair. She has money. We just need help. We are her parents. We have the right. You have the right to remain silent, Mr. Carter, the bailiff said calmly. I recommend you use that right. The courtroom doors closed, taking away my parents and lifting the shadow that had pressed on my heart for many years. Judge Brooks sat back down, adjusted his glasses, then addressed me in a solemn yet gentle tone. Miss Carter, please rise. I stood up, my legs trembling slightly, not from fear, but from intense emotional upheaval. This court, after today's hearing, not only dismisses the petitioner's guardianship petition against you, but apologizes for the ridiculous legal attack you have endured. Judge Brooks's voice became softer. Your financial situation is not only clear and healthy, but your judgment and independent living abilities are unquestionable. In fact, You have demonstrated strategic thinking and wisdom, far exceeding many people's expectations. He paused, then continued. I want to particularly note that the strategic thinking and commitment to justice you displayed in this case proves that not only do you not need guardianship, but you possess extraordinary ability to protect yourself from those who would exploit you. Thank you, Your Honor. I bowed deeply with sincere gratitude in my voice. This court formally dismisses John Carter and Margaret Carter's guardianship petition against Emily Carter and recommends the Massachusetts Attorney General's office immediately file criminal charges against the petitioners for insurance fraud, perjury, and related offenses. The gavel fell one final time, not an angry strike, but a declaration of justice. Walking out the doors of Suffolk County Family Court, November's Boston sky remained overcast, but for me, sunlight seemed to pierce through the clouds. More reporters gathered on the steps, their camera flashes twinkling like stars, microphones extending toward us, with questions arising one after another. Miss Carter, how do you feel about today's outcome? How did you discover your parents' fraudulent behavior? Do you plan to sue your parents? Sarah skillfully shielded me from most reporters, raising her hand to signal for quiet. My client has just endured an emotionally difficult hearing today. She needs time to process these events. We will issue a formal statement at the appropriate time. But I stopped. I realized this was my first opportunity to speak for myself, for all those who are underestimated and misunderstood. I want to say one thing. I spoke into the microphones with a voice steadier than I expected. Today represents not just my personal victory, but a response to the prejudice that equates quiet, independent lifestyles with incompetence. Everyone has the right to choose their own way of life, as long as it harms no one else. No one, not even parents, has the right to attempt to strip away our freedom and dignity simply because they do not understand or like our choices. Reporters frantically recorded my words. I knew this would become tomorrow's headlines in major media outlets. In Sarah's Mercedes, we sat quietly for several minutes, watching the courthouse building recede in the rearview mirror. How does it feel? Sarah asked, handing me a steaming cup of Starbucks coffee. Like throwing away a coat I had worn for many years that never fit properly. I inhaled deeply the coffee's aroma. Liberating, but also somewhat empty. Empty? I realize I spent so many years hiding my true self, thinking this would avoid conflict and harm. But today proved that sometimes the greatest protection comes from courageously standing up and showing your real strength. Sarah nodded. Emily, I must say the calm and strategic thinking you displayed today impressed me tremendously. That trap regarding the brooch will go down as a classic case in legal history. I simply used skills I learned in archival work: patience, attention to detail, and logical reasoning. History teaches you that truth always surfaces eventually. The key is knowing where to look and how to wait. Over the following weeks, my life changed dramatically. First came media attention. My case was covered by major news websites with headlines ranging from "Solitary Woman Outsmarts Greedy Parents" to "Archivist's Perfect Revenge." The Boston Globe even published an editorial discussing legal protection for adult children facing family economic extortion. But more important was the internal change. For the first time in years, I no longer needed to hide my abilities and achievements. I began reassessing my collection, no longer viewing these pieces as property requiring secrecy, but as cultural wealth I could share with the world. 3 weeks after the trial, I received a call from Boston City Museum Director James Webster. Miss Carter, I saw your case in the news, and I wonder if you would consider lending part of your collection to our museum for exhibition. This proposal made me think deeply. For years, I had viewed collecting as a private hobby, but now I realized that true collectors should be guardians of culture, not hoarders of wealth. I spent an entire weekend reorganizing my collection. I discovered that among the hundreds of items I owned, many held important historical and cultural value that should not remain locked in a private apartment, but should be shared with the public. I decided to donate the most significant portion, approximately $1 million worth of collectibles, to Boston City Museum. This included a complete set of documents and artifacts from the Boston Tea Party period, Civil War officers' uniforms and weapons collection, early New England immigrant diaries and household items, a series of rare 19th century American silverware and porcelain. The donation ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. The museum's main exhibition hall filled with cultural notables, history scholars, and media representatives. I wore a deep blue suit, purchased specifically for this occasion, representing my new life phase. Director Webster said in his address, "Today, we witness not merely a generous donation, but the emergence of a true cultural guardian. Miss Emily Carter used her professional knowledge, patience, and love to collect and protect these precious historical artifacts. Now, she chooses to share these treasures with the entire community, embodying the highest ideal of collecting, not possession, but transmission." When I stood at the podium looking at those attentive faces below, I thought about the stories behind those objects, about their former owners, about the historical moments they witnessed. "These artifacts do not belong solely to me," I said in my address. "They belong to everyone interested in history, to everyone wanting to understand where we came from. Through this donation, I hope to inspire more people to explore, protect, and transmit our shared cultural heritage." When applause erupted, I felt unprecedented satisfaction. This was not satisfaction brought by money, but satisfaction from knowing my efforts could contribute to the community and cultural transmission. Meanwhile, my parents faced serious legal consequences. Insurance fraud in Massachusetts is a felony punishable by up to 5 years imprisonment and heavy fines. The Federal Bureau of Investigation also began investigating their possible international art trafficking activities. Ultimately, through plea negotiations with prosecutors, Father John received a 2-year prison sentence with 3 years probation and must repay $500,000 to the insurance company. Mother Margaret received 18 months imprisonment with 2-year probation and mandatory gambling addiction treatment. That Midnight Star sapphire brooch, which triggered all the controversy, was eventually discovered in the Swiss bank safety deposit box, confiscated as stolen property, and will be returned to the insurance company after completing legal procedures. I did not visit them in prison, nor had any contact with them. This was not from resentment, but from self-protection. I realized that some family relationships are toxic, and the best way to handle them is to cut all ties. 6 months after the trial, my life found a new balance. I still work at the Massachusetts Historical Archives, but my role has changed. Director Mary Thompson proposed that I lead a new project, establishing a private collection donation program to help collectors like myself donate valuable artifacts to public institutions. "Emily," Mary said in our project meeting, "your case made us realize that in the Boston area, many people may possess important historical artifacts, but they do not know these items' value or how to share them with the public. Your professional knowledge and experience make you the perfect person to head this project." This new position not only allowed better use of my professional skills, but gave me a platform to help other collectors. Over the following months, I contacted dozens of individual collectors, helping them authenticate, evaluate, and decide how to handle their collections. One case particularly impressed me. An 80-year-old lady named Ruth Freeman lived in an old house in Cambridge. After her husband died, she discovered a pile of old papers in the basement that she planned to throw away as trash. When I visited her home, I discovered those old papers were actually a complete set of 18th and 19th century deeds and legal documents detailing land use changes in the Cambridge area from colonial times to the industrial period. These documents held immeasurable value for studying New England urban development history. "I never knew these things were so important," Mrs. Freeman said gratefully. "If not for you, they might already be in a landfill." Ultimately, these documents were donated to Harvard University's History Department. Mrs. Freeman received considerable tax benefits, and most importantly, she knew these documents would be used for academic research and continue fulfilling their value. Professional success also brought changes to my personal life. I began participating more in social activities, no longer limiting myself to my apartment's small world. I joined the New England Antiques Association and became a member of their education committee. I began speaking at various conferences and seminars, sharing my collecting experience and authentication techniques. I also started writing columns for Antiques Monthly and Collectors Magazine. More unexpectedly, I began dating. At an antique auction, I met David Robinson, a 42-year-old history professor specializing in American Industrial Revolution social history. He was searching for some 19th century factory records to support his research, and I happened to have relevant collections. "Your collection is amazing," David said in the coffee shop after the auction. "These account books record not just numbers, but the entire labor history of an era." We began meeting regularly, discussing history, collecting, and our respective research projects. David was a gentle and interesting man who understood my passion for history, appreciated my professional knowledge, and most importantly, never tried to change my lifestyle. "You know, Emily," he said during our third date, "I have never met someone who could make the past world so vivid and interesting like you do. Being with you, I feel like I am not just studying history, but having conversations with history itself." Our relationship developed naturally, without dramatic romance, but with deep understanding and respect. He enjoyed coming to my apartment, not to change anything, but to appreciate this small historical museum I had created. One autumn evening, a year after the court trial, I sat alone on my apartment windowsill, holding a cup of hot tea, watching people hurry past on the street below. My apartment had changed significantly. Though I had donated many collectibles, the remaining pieces were displayed more systematically. Each item had its own story card recording its history and significance. The entire space no longer looked like hoarding, but more like a professionally curated private museum. Some of David's books also appeared on my bookshelves, and materials from our joint research projects were neatly arranged on the work table. This space finally no longer belonged to just me alone, but had become a place I could share with others. I picked up the pen on my desk, left by my great-grandfather, the only item I had never considered donating. I opened my diary and began writing. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the court trial. A year ago today, I thought I was fighting to protect my property, but I now realize I was actually fighting for my right to exist. I learned much. True independence is not isolation, but the ability to stand alone when necessary. True strength is not hiding your abilities, but knowing when and how to display them. True wealth is not what you own, but how you use what you possess to make the world better. I lost my biological family, but I gained a larger community. I lost some money, but I gained invaluable respect and freedom. Most importantly, I no longer need to hide to protect myself. History tells us that the most important battles are often not for conquering others, but for conquering the fear and doubt within ourselves. Today, I can proudly say I won this battle. For Emily Carter, this is not merely an ending, but a completely new beginning. I set down the pen and looked out at the city lights. In Boston's night sky, stars twinkled, each light representing a story, a dream, a life being written. My life was finally being written by myself. In the distance, I heard the whistle of a boat on the Charles River, the eternal background music of this ancient city. Like those historical artifacts I collect and protect, this city has witnessed countless individual struggles and victories. Today, I too became part of this larger story. Outside the window, the night was gentle and the stars brilliant, while in my heart, I felt complete peace and satisfaction for the first time.